Ravi Handa, and this is Desi Fire Podcast. Today, I'm going to review the HDFC Nifty 500 Multicap 50-25-25 Fund. The reason why I'm doing this is because I often get queries from viewers, listeners, and followers on Twitter is that they want to get started with FIRE. They understand that they need to put money in equity, but they're just starting their investment journey and they don't really know how to do that. And the solution for that, in my opinion, is this particular fund. Now, why am I suggesting that? Well, this entire video is about the reasons that I have for recommending this particular fund as the fund of choice. I'll also like to add that I don't have any investment in this particular fund because this is a recent fund. But if I was starting my FIRE journey today, I'll put all my money in this fund and just forget about it. The reasons for that? Let's begin. First of all, we need to understand what sort of companies this particular fund invests in. And for that, you need to understand what is a large cap, what is a mid cap, and what is a small cap. The top 100 companies which are there listed in the Indian stock markets are the large cap companies. From 101 to 250, that is the next 150 ones, are the mid caps. And the next 250, that is from 251 to 500, they are the next lot, which is known as the small caps. Now, what a lot of people think is that, oh, the large cap companies are the really big ones and the mid caps and the small caps are not so big. That's untrue. What you need to understand is that even the 101st company, which is essentially a mid cap company, is a 90,000 crore company. So it's not really a small company. You are not buying penny stocks. These are really, really big companies. As a matter of fact, even if you look at the smallest company, that is the 500th company that is there, even the 500 company, which is at 10,000 crores. So these are not small companies. These are really, really big companies. Yes, the large cap ones are really, really, really big, but these are all big companies. So you need not really be worried too much about them that you are investing in a penny stock or something like that. These are big companies. You need not worry about that. And that being said, what exactly is there in this particular fund? Now, what you need to understand is that if you look at these three categories, that is the top 100, then the mid cap, and then the small cap, it is not that all of these companies will give you good returns at all points of time. At some point of time, the large cap is going to do well. At some points of time, the mid cap is going to do well. And at some point of time, the small cap is going to do well. So if you look at this chart, what it essentially means is that let's pick up any random year. In FY10, the best returns came from the small cap, which was 141%. The best possible year that could have been. The mid cap in that particular year gave 138 and the large caps gave 84%. So in this particular year, if you had money in the small caps, that would have done much better. On the other hand, if you pick up, let's say something like FY07, in that particular case, the large caps would have done well. So there will be periods when the large cap would do well, there will be the periods where mid cap would do well, there will be periods where the small cap would do well. And if you have a look at this chart, you'll realize there isn't a consistent winner, so to say. The winner is shown in the green color, the second is shown in the yellow color, and the loser, or the one which is third, is shown in the red color. So as you can see, mid cap is essentially always in the middle. Sometimes the large cap is winning. Most of the times the small cap is winning. So does that mean that you should put all your money in small caps? No, because small caps are very, very volatile as well. If you look at the FY09, where the large cap fell by minus 36%, this fell by minus 55% roughly. So that means you lost more than half your funds here. So where to put your money? And that's the reason why people recommend that you invest across large cap, mid cap, small cap. You should not be concentrated in just one set of companies. How people do that? Well, there are a few Nifty 500 index funds which are there, which will invest your money in the same ratio of the market caps. But what that leads to is it will have very little exposure to small caps. It will only have a 10% exposure to small caps, around 18% to mid cap, and the bulk of it will be there in the large caps, or the 73% will be there in just the top 100 companies. What this particular fund from HDFC does is that it puts only 50% in large caps, another 25% in mid caps, and another 25% in small caps. So it does that balancing in a lot better fashion rather than this. Is that a good idea? We'll find that out shortly. But this is broadly what it does. Also, it does it at a very, very cheap cost. The expense ratio is only 0.3 and they rebalance every quarter. Theoretically, you could do this on your own. You could buy a large cap fund, you could buy a mid cap fund, and you could buy a small cap fund. And every quarter you could do the rebalancing yourself. You don't need someone else. But if you do that, A, you might not be able to do it very efficiently. And B, which is more important, is that every time you have a gain, you will have to pay taxes on it. So it's much better to just give your money to one particular fund and let them handle it. And this gives you an exposure to all of them, the large cap, the mid cap, and the small cap. And that being said, the most important parts, why should I bother with all this? Well, because the returns are there. Let's have a look at that. Now, if you look at the returns, which is the CAGR that we are talking about, this is a little dated, June 28 data. The Nifty 500 multi-cap fund, which this particular fund that we are talking about, has done exceptionally well. Well, the fund just launched, they are doing back testing of the data. Any particular period that you pick, in any particular period, this 50-25-25 ratio has done better than the Nifty 500, and that has done better than just the Nifty 50. Nifty 50 index funds are really, really popular. As a matter of fact, I believe the biggest part of my equity exposure will be in Nifty 50 index funds, because something like this did not exist before. This is a very, very new fund. It just launched this particular year. That is why I said that if this fund existed 10 years ago, when a little more, when I was starting my investment journey, I would put just all my money in this fund and forget about it. The other part, now, if you look at year-wise returns, and then again you compare this particular fund versus the Nifty 500 versus the Nifty 50, you will once again see majority of the times, where do you see the most greens? The most greens are in this. It's not that it will always win, but bulk of the times, if you can see, this is the fund, the one from HDFC is winning. If you look at the rolling returns, well, it doesn't make too much sense to look at the 1 year or the 3 year one. If you look at the 5 year or the 10 year returns, even then the rolling returns are much better for this Nifty 500 multi-cap fund instead of the regular Nifty 500. That is another reason for picking this particular fund, for me recommending this particular fund. Now, all this data that is there till now, this I picked up from the HDFC website, and obviously they will show if they are launching a product that, boss, we are doing a very, very good job. But then I also looked at other places. Now, this is a chart that I found from the Free FinCal website. In case you haven't seen that, please check that out. Patu sir does a phenomenal job, and he has been a great influence in my investing journey as well. A lot of the investment decisions that I have made have been thanks to reading his blog. So what he did was, instead of looking at the average rolling returns, because the average doesn't really mean much. It depends on what you are going to get. It's much better to look at a chart of rolling returns. And if you look at this particular part, this is the 5 year rolling returns part. Which one do you think is winning? I believe that in some cases I can see the brown is up, again the brown one is up. In most of the cases, I believe the yellow one is up. I do not have the exact data, but I read what sir wrote on his blog. He said that if you look at 5 year, it's broadly the same. Half the times Nifty 50 would win and half the times Nifty multi-cap would win. But when we are talking about investing for 5 years, we are looking at much longer periods. So it's better to look at a 10-year period. And once you move to a 10-year period sort of a time frame, you will see the Nifty multi-cap wins very, very consistently. I'll put a link to this particular blog post where I got this data as well as all the other charts from in the description. So again, clear winner, the Nifty multi-cap over here. What Sir also did was he looked at the risk which is involved in this. And if you look at the risk part of it, the risk for the Nifty Next 50, which is companies from number 51 to 100, that's a little bit on the higher side when you compare it with Nifty 50. And the Nifty multi-cap is broadly in line with the Nifty 50. So you're getting better returns and you have the same sort of risk profile which exists in the Nifty 50. That makes it a very, very compelling case to just get the Nifty multi-cap fund. And that's why the solution to this particular problem for people who are just starting out, what to do, which fund should I start with, I recommend that you start with the HDFC Nifty 500 multi-cap 50-25-25 fund. Why? You have to invest in equities for the long term. You have to invest in equity if you want to fire at some point of time or the other. Now, when it comes to investing in equity, you can pick stocks on your own. I don't think that you will be able to do a good enough job at picking stocks on your own, and that's why it's better to give it to a fund manager. So you should pick an active mutual fund. There is a lot of debate about whether mutual fund managers will be able to beat an index fund or a passive fund over a long term or not. Well, we don't know what will happen, but the fund's philosophy can change in any active fund that you have invested in. I have seen funds change even their names. SEBI comes up with a new classification that goes by. The fund manager changes companies, so you don't really have the talent anymore. Plenty of things can potentially go wrong over a 10-year, 15-year period with an active fund. So for FIRE, it's much better to stick with a passive index fund. And the passive index fund is also very, very cheap. By that I mean the expense ratio. In this case, which is just 0.3. If you look at an active fund, they'll have much higher expense ratios. Also, the index funds which were typically available, at least when I started investing with the Nifty 50 funds, which didn't really cover the entire market, so to say. It didn't have any exposure to mid caps or small caps. So all those years when the mid caps were doing much better or the small caps were doing much better, I felt that I was missing out. And that meant that, oh, I'll buy some mid cap fund on my own and I'll start chasing active funds. And it took a lot of time and energy. I don't want you to go through all that. All your time, all your energy, if you are a FIRE aspirant, should go in making more money. Your investing process should be as simple as possible. You need not use your head about it. You can potentially go to an advisor and he will take care of all your issues. But it becomes difficult to trust an advisor as well. And in India, it's very difficult to find an advisor who has your interests at heart. And that is why a passive index fund where you are not relying on an individual or a company works better. You are just investing all your money in the Indian stock market. If you have to invest in equity, this works really, really well. It covers the entire market, and that is why I'll very strongly recommend that if you're a FIRE aspirant who's just starting his investment journey, please just get one fund, get this fund and forget about it. Put all your money here. Once you build up a portfolio, you get an advisor, you become smarter, you want to take your own calls, please go ahead and do it. But if you're going to rely on a person you saw on YouTube or Twitter for advice, it's best to go with a passive index fund, and this becomes a very good solution for that. I hope I would have clarified some of your doubts. And when in future, the main reason for making this video is people ask me this question, I tell them this fund. And then they ask, why are you recommending this? Well, I will not have to answer those people individually now. I can just send them a link to this particular video and hopefully they will be convinced. That's pretty much it. Hope you liked it. Please do follow me, like this video, comment on this video. If you have a counter view, I'll be happy to discuss it with you. Thank you.